Republicans are using an all-of-the-above strategy when it comes to suppressing the vote in this election. Vote ID may get all the headlines, but GOP efforts to limit voting rights are a lot broader than that. In the last 2 years, 9 states have tried to pass laws to limit early voting. 5 of them succeeded. And now voter purges are suddenly reemerging in more than a dozen states, including crucial battlegrounds. Both President Obama and Governor Romney know how important the swing states are to winning the election. That's why this week, both campaigns are spending the bulk of their TV ad money in just 4 states: Colorado, Ohio, Virginia, and Iowa. Crucial states where voting rights are under attack. Most Republicans insist it's all about preventing voter fraud. But once in a while, we hear someone tell the truth about what's really behind these attacks on voting rights. Joining me now is Jim Greer, former chairman of the Republican Party of Florida. Mr. Greer, thanks for being on the show tonight.
It's a pleasure to be here, Al.
Now, you recently made some stunning claims in court documents about Florida's GOP's new voting laws. Take us into the meetings that you were at and what was said about suppression.
Well, I think, first of all, you have to realize that most reasonable Republicans and Americans as a whole, if they knew what went on behind the political curtain, they not only would be disgusted, they demand that it stop. As chairman of Florida's GOP and a member of the RNC Rules Committee, I sat in on many meetings where it was discussed of how to make sure that what happened in 2008, when President Obama brought out the college-age voters, the minority voters, never happened again. And, you know, the Republican Party believes that minority voters in general are not ever going to vote Republican. So discussions centered around how do we make sure that what happened in 2008 never happens again. And part of those discussions dealt with changing the election laws in Florida and how to ensure that the Republican Party doesn't have to deal with what it dealt with in 2008. And some of those changes dealt with reducing early voting. Right. Because people know or statistics show that early voters are not generally leaning Republican.
Well, let me stop you right there.
Sure.
We have the data. 54% of African Americans voted early in 2008. So you're right. The data is very clear that early voting was certainly used, and you had sold to the polls where the churches were using early voting. Go ahead.
So, you know, they talked about reducing early voting because that wasn't helping us win, the Republican Party win. They talked about making voter registration much more difficult for third-party organizations like the League of Women Voters, who have been doing this for many, many years. There were a lot of discussions of what could the Republican Party do, led by the political campaign strategist, to ensure that Republicans win in 2012. And it's very sad what's going on in the Republican Party. It's very sad that the Republican Party doesn't want to win votes by talking about what it stands for. It wants to ensure that some people can't get to the polls, can't register to vote. You know, the political strategists of the GOP can't control what voters do in the voting booth, but they can certainly try and control them ever getting to the voting booth. And that's what's happened in Florida.
So you were chair of the party, you were on the RNC Rules Committee, and you were in the room, and you said this in sworn deposition, when the discussion was not about fraud and any of the things, but really how we affect who will be able to vote, and particularly minorities and young people, because they felt that gave the edge to President Obama. You're stating this, that was the discussion in the room.
Absolutely. In 3.5 years as chairman of Florida, I never had one meeting where voter fraud was discussed as a real issue affecting elections. Never one time. Voter fraud
Never one time fraud was never a major issue in any of your discussions in 3.5 years as the state chair of Florida?
Never one time did we have any discussions where voter fraud was a real issue. It's simply been created as a marketing tool here in Florida for the right wing that is running state government now to convince voters that what they're doing is right. It's a marketing tool. That's clearly what it is. There's no validity to it. We never had issues with it. The main purpose behind it is to make sure that what happened in '08 never happens again, and if that includes keeping voters from voting, keeping voters from registering, that's what the GOP-led government here in Florida is going to do.
Now, you said in your deposition that political consultants and staff were talking about voter suppression and keeping blacks from voting. They talked about not letting blacks vote, and minority outreach programs was not fit for the Republican Party. Now, you've been facing legal difficulties. You're under an indictment. Some have said you're just saying this to get even, to some payback. How do you respond to that?
Well, first of all, it's sad. The Republican Party, particularly the political strategists, are very good at discrediting somebody who knows the truth. They do this for a living, and they've done everything they can. The right-wing people took over the Republican Party here in Florida. They forced me out as chairman. They hated Charlie Crist. Governor Crist and I were considered moderates. I like to refer to us as reasonable Republicans. But, they've tried to discredit me. They forced me out as chairman of the party because they wanted someone who fit their views better. They were successful at that. The Republican Party right now in Florida, and unfortunately in a lot of parts of this country, is being run by pitchfork, torch-bearing mobs looking for Frankenstein. And anyone who gets in their way, or any law that gets in their way to winning elections, they're going to try and push it aside. And that's not what America's about.
Jim, I know we had 1 second, but I'm going to break rank here. Stay with me. I want you to stay with me. We'll be right back with more from you right after this. Jim Greer on Politics Nation with Al Sharpton. We'll be right back.